Lesson 35. I'm going to start with a summary of chapter 7, and then we'll go into 8. In chapter 7, Jesus' brothers try to convince him to go publicly to the feast in Jerusalem. He tells them that is not yet his time. After they leave, Jesus goes up to Jerusalem in private for the feast. Later, he goes to the temple and begins to teach. The people are amazed by his teaching because he had received no training. He then tells the people that he is going to a place where they cannot go. They're puzzled by this. Later on, some of the Jews were thinking that he is the Messiah, and some were thinking that he was not the Messiah, and some of them just plain wanted to kill him. Chapter 8, 753 through 8, verse 2. And everyone went to his own house, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Now early in the morning he came again to the temple, and all the people came to him, and he sat down and he taught them. If we take the chronology of the Gospel of John in its current composition, Jesus remained in Jerusalem for a few days after the Feast of Tabernacles, or Feast of Booths. Though the religious authorities wanted to silence and arrest him, he still boldly taught large crowds in the most public place in Jerusalem, the temple. Verses 3 through 5. Then the scribes and Pharisees brought to him a woman caught in adultery. And when they had sat her down in the midst, they said to him, Teacher, this woman was caught in adultery and in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what do you say? They did this as Jesus publicly taught in the temple courts. They wanted to make this as public as possible, to embarrass both the woman and to embarrass Jesus. The religious leaders brought this woman to Jesus in shame-filled, humiliating types of circumstances. She was held against her will, a prisoner under the custody of the religious police, who caught her involved with a man who was not her husband in the very act of adultery. To remain in that situation was, of course, sinful. Uh, and the obvious thing here is that they only brought the woman, they did not bring the man along, which is a signal that there was some monkey business going on here. It also meant that there were prearranged spies sent to witness this affair, and they carefully noted the sordid details. They set up a trap for Jesus here. If Jesus said, let her go, then he would seem to break the law of Moses. If he said, on the other hand, excuse her for these crimes, uh, then Jesus would seem harsh and not following the law properly. If Jesus said to stone her, then Jesus would seem to perhaps be very cruel, and especially he would be breaking the Roman law, because the Romans had taken the right of official execution for religious offenses away from the Jews. So it was all staged. It was a trap. Verse 6. This they said, testing him, that they might have something of which to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down, wrote on the ground with his finger, as though he did not hear what they were saying. On Jesus' part, this was a careful and deliberate response. Instead of making an immediate verbal response, he stooped down. Then he wrote on the ground with his finger, presumably in the dirt on the ground. Stooping down is a position of low posture, identifying with the humiliation of the woman. He got down on her level. Jesus did what he could to identify with her and care for her and ease the embarrassment this woman had. One may say this story illustrates the greater problem. How can God show love and grace to a sinner without being unjust, without breaking his own law? He does it by first identifying with the sinner in their low condition. And he wrote on the ground. That means that he wrote in the presence of the woman and the accusers. What Jesus wrote has been the source of endless speculation for Bible scholars over the years. Some think that Jesus simply doodled in the dirt. The verb translated wrote could also mean to draw. Some think Jesus simply stalled for time. Some think that Jesus wrote the passage in the law that condemned the adulterous woman. Some think that Jesus wrote out a passage like Exodus 23:1, which says, "Do not put your hand with the wicked to be an unrighteous witness." An unrighteous witness. So that plays into this all. Some think that Jesus wrote the names of the accusers. Some think that Jesus wrote the sins of the accusers down. Some think that Jesus followed Roman judicial practice and wrote out his sentence before he said it. We'll stop here for this lesson.